Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video page. Huck is in the room. She's in here keeping us company. Yeah, you good girl. Oh yeah. Great Pyrenees love having their heads scratched. That's one of her favorite things, huh? Oh yeah, she's a good girl. Yeah, she's a good puppy. Okay, yeah, good girl. He's a good girl. Yeah. So we are going to do a missing persons segment tonight, today, this morning, wherever you're at, whatever time it is. Hello, and thanks for being here. I had a lot of comments in the last week about the letter segment. I'll show it one more time in case you missed the last one. Last time I put up the letters, I lost 3 subscribers. Normally I'd have 20,000, only had 10,000 people watching. And because it takes as much time to do a letter segment as it does a missing person segment, I've got to make a decision. Do I continue to waste my time and lose people by doing letters? It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? And that's the hard point. I know that some of you are getting unsubscribed. Other people say that sometimes they can't even give me a thumbs up. And sometimes you watch I watch the data analytics going impossible directions the wrong way. And I don't quite understand what's going on here at YouTube. I have to admit it to you. I've been pretty frustrated. Which is why I took the news segments to Rumble. If you go to David Paulides, Missing 411 presents the factual news, you'll find me on Rumble. And I will continue to do that only on Rumble. It doesn't cost anything to join. It's free. Don't have to do anything. Just go over there and watch it. And I plan on staying here with the missing person segments. And as new shows come up, say the next Skinwalker series comes up, I'll do that. And remember, I have a 20-part Bigfoot class I gave here. Had a lot of views. And you guys have said a lot of nice things. And you can watch all 20 segments of it here, and then you can take a final. So, yeah, there's a lot on this channel. 625 different things. It helps me immensely if you are watching them. Doesn't matter if they're new or they're old. I get credit if you watch old ones as much as if you watch new ones. So if you click on the little CanAm Missing on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, that'll take you to a screen. Click on videos, that'll take you to all of my videos. You can watch for days. There's 630 of them now. But we're here today about a missing persons case. One of the strangest missing persons cases I've ever researched. Truly. Now, I don't know how many of you have read this book, Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence. This is really a lot about what this show is about today. And what I mean is, there was a detective named Gannon who worked in New York, who worked missing people, who started to figure out that people that would disappear in one part of New York, near a river, would be found upstream from where they disappeared. An impossible scenario, and still be in the water. And then people that were supposedly in the water for a week didn't show the telltale signs of being in the water for a week. So where were they? And I give him all the credit for putting that together. And I did a lot of work following his reports. Stellar job. Stellar. And then I started to look across the nation and in other countries, and I found out that these cases that he was working matched the missing 411 profile with one weird twist. These people were being found in the water under very, very extraordinary circumstances. And many of the times they couldn't figure out the cause of death. Many times they didn't show symptoms of being in the water a long period of time. Almost all the time they were young people, young men and young women under 30. Now I'm going to tell you about this case. Now Gannon worked in New York City and the areas around New York City. And this case, right around New York City. It involved a young girl named Rachel Anniello, 7 years old, missing November 11th, 1936. Her nickname was Ray Ray. She was mute. She could only say her name and nothing else. She was described as being small and frail for her size. Now, she lived with her aunt and her grandmother and her two sisters in New Rochelle, New York. Her aunt's name was Susie Motto. Now, her two sisters, Rose was 10 years old and Frances was 2 years. And the three girls' parents lived in the Bronx. It was never explained why the girls lived with the aunt and the grandmother, because the mother was living with the husband in another part of New York. Now here's another weird coincidence about this. If you've read my books, you know I say this often. Rachel, in the articles that I read about this, the articles even addressed it, said that she had a boys style haircut. A lot of the victims that I identify, especially girls, have boys style haircuts. Keep that in the back of your mind. Now, this is Rachel. Now, the haircut she had here didn't necessarily mean that it was the same at the time. Go up a little closer. Same at the time when she disappeared, but it does look short there. So, Rachel, obviously disabled to some level. At 4 p.m., she was last seen in front of her aunt and grandmother's house. 5 p.m., her sisters and her aunt went to look for her, couldn't find her. They looked all over the neighborhood, called her name, called her friends, they didn't get anything. At 6 p.m., they called the general police number in New Rochelle. By 9:30, they hadn't gotten a response, so one of the ladies knew a detective sergeant named Gerhard Bloom, and they called him, and they stated that they needed help. Bloom responded with 5 additional officers and a captain. It's amazing what a detective sergeant can do. And they told him the circumstances, and they said she was last seen wearing a flowered dress, a brown sweater, and ankle-high boots. They stated that she'd never ran away. She had wandered one time to another place at one time, but that was only for a couple hours, and then she came back. But police searched with additional assistance all the way through that first night. And then the next morning in a press release, they said that they believed that she walked to a nearby railroad embankment and fell off somewhere. I don't know how they got that the first night, but that's what they said. They lived in New Rochelle near some woods and some railroad tracks. November 12th, the next day, 30 neighbors of the aunt and uncle reported to the house at 7 a.m. and said that they wanted to help. It was stated in the paper that Rachel was loved by everyone in that neighborhood. They all knew she was a special person, and they cared about her, and they looked out for her. Well, the family, Rachel's family, owned a fish store in New York City, and the uncle owned a grocery store in the area where they lived. And he got a hold of the milkmen and the delivery drivers and tradesmen that morning early and said, "Would you please help search for my niece?" They did, and they turned out in bulk. Police sent teletypes throughout the state advising what had happened, requesting any other similar cases, and any other information if someone's seen like Rachel. There were 70 officers on scene searching the neighborhood and the railroad tracks and the backyards, and they were contacting neighbors. And when the neighbors were home, they were searching the neighbors' backyards. And then they made notes, and they came back later to find out the neighbors that weren't home were home, searched their home, searched their backyard. November 13th. Remember, she disappeared on the 11th. So the 13th, about 36 hours after she disappears, the first bloodhounds become on scene. The first bloodhound tracks a scent to a patch of woods near the home, through the woods to a real estate development on Webster Street. And the dog got on this trail after following a trail through the backyards of some of the homes. Police searched all those basements, private dwellings, abandoned homes, there were several, and some sewer systems. It was about this time police made a statement that they were concerned, very concerned, that they hadn't found anything about Rachel. I can understand that, especially with the aunt, the grandmother, and now the mother was on scene with her husband. November 14th, bloodhounds were again on scene. And just down the block from where Rachel lived, there was a 21-year-old male that was arrested for indecent exposure not far from that block. Suspect was pulled in and questioned by detectives working Rachel's case. They stated that he had 6 prior arrests for a multitude of different things, but after speaking to him all day, they later released him with no charges in regards to Rachel. Also on the 14th, they were able to bring in the best search and rescue dog in the state of New York. It belonged to a state trooper, and the dog's name was Sappo. Sappo was given her scent. Dog took off, and the words of the article said that it took a twist and turn through the woods and lake country, and it lost scent on Webster Avenue. Very similar to what the other dog did, isn't it? That would become highly suspicious at this point. Police made a statement that to them it appeared Rachel had walked through the woods, or was carried or pulled through the woods, got to Webster Street, and was put into a car because the scent trail ended there. In the meantime, 100 Boy Scouts and 65 American Legion members were searching the clues shoulder to shoulder in the woods between her house and Webster Street. They stated that they didn't have any misconceptions or any hardcore theories, but the best one is that she went through the woods and she disappeared on Webster. Now, New Rochelle, New York, you may want to know where that is. That's kind of important. So here's New York. This is Brooklyn. Here's Queens, Yonkers, and this is New Rochelle. Starts down in this area, goes all the way up into here. Has a lot of wooded area, kind of in the northeast part of the city. This is Kennedy International Airport. Been into that several times. So you kind of have a feeling where this happened. November 16th. Firefighters from New Rochelle and surrounding areas had been recruited by police. And them and state troopers and off-duty city policemen were brought in by Captain Lewis, Vincent Lewis, and they ran a search and rescue. They said it wouldn't stop until she was found. Well, the police and the firefighters were put into grid searches and walked the woods, walked the backyards of the neighbors around the house. Again, searched the backyards of all the neighbors in the house. The best theory, they stated again for a second day in a row, is that Rachel wandered through the woods and got picked up in a car. And they said that they couldn't ignore what 2 of the best canines in the state had come up with. November 17th. Police dragged 3 different lakes in Westchester County. The American Legion and the Boy Scouts kept searching the woods over and over again. When they got down there, they were brought back into the same neighborhood and searched the same neighborhood she was in again and again. And in fact, the American Legions manually opened 22 manholes, went down in and searched. All homes on the street Rachel lived were searched for a third time. Yards were searched for a third time. Now you think, Dave, isn't that a little bit of overkill? Absolutely not. Just because an area is searched once doesn't mean you found everything. Doesn't mean you didn't miss something. You always go back and search multiple times. But after a certain point, you start to say, okay, enough is enough. We've been over this area 2 or 3 times with 2 or 3 different teams, and no one's finding anything. And that's about the time you regroup and you come up with some new theories or some new areas to search. They were getting very close at this time. November 18th, Captain Lewis, who was in charge of this investigation, made a very unusual statement that I haven't heard before. He said that every obscure place needs to be searched again. Wow. A brilliant statement, honestly. He asked homeowners to check their yards, their basements for a second and third time. And they printed off, with the help of local businesses, over 1,000 flyers of Rachel, her picture, her background, Captain Lewis's phone number, and passed them out around the greater New York area. He was asked by the press how the cooperation level was of the neighbors where Rachel lived. He said they couldn't have been more helpful. He said it was 100% on board, anything we needed, whatever. And that was kind of from the beginning the way people portrayed their feelings towards Rachel. Now, November 19th, this happened on November 11th, so about 8 days now into it. Police have another press conference. They stated they're mystified. They're mystified because they've got nothing. Nobody's making a claim that they kidnapped her. No suspects are showing up. They went back again for a 4th time and searched vacant homes and properties in the area. And then the director of public safety for New Rochelle, a man named Paul Tilden, stated, "This is one of the most perplexing cases in the history of our city." Wow. That's pretty serious stuff. And it shows at this point they've got nothing. You've heard this from me before. They've got nothing. So what do you do as a policeman? Call in new blood, call in new dogs, call in new detectives to look what you've done. Probably call in the FBI, but they didn't. November 20th. Search was going to continue for days. Slowly started to taper off. The detectives were continuing to follow leads that came in because it was a front page article in every newspaper in the East Coast. But there was weeks where no new information was developed. And the best to be described is that Rachel's neighborhood was in shambles. Everyone was worried. They didn't know if they had a killer in their neighborhood. They lost a beloved resident. And you tend to start looking at each other, just the way it is. One thing I never heard about, and this was in 1936, is any air support. Never heard about any planes flying over the area. And at that time, New York State Police had it, but I'm not sure why they didn't use it. I was impressed that they used 2 different dogs, and maybe more because it was a little unclear how many dogs did go into that area. But for sure, 2 dogs searched into the forest and out onto Webster Street. Remember that. And remember, I'm going to show you again. I've always stated that water is the key to all of these disappearances. Close to water. And there were creeks and lakes right in the area where she disappeared. Water. And What is this book all about? Water disappearances. Read some of the reviews on Amazon. Don't buy the book on Amazon. Buy it from me. You can buy it at NA, like North America, BigfootSearch.com. Go to the online store. Amazon, you'll pay 3 or 4 times as much. So, December 27th, a neighbor named William Sabatino lived about 300 feet from Rachel's home. He woke up one morning and he's walking through his house, windows open out, looking towards the back, right into another neighbor's yard. And he sees a couple of barrels next to the neighbor's garage, right to the back of the garage. And he sees something sticking out of one of the barrels. In his mind, he's saying, I never saw that before. He gets closer and he looks, and it's 2 legs sticking out of the barrel. Well, that's pretty weird. So he gets closer, and yeah, it looks like 2 human legs. Calls the New Rochelle police. They come out. Yeah. Guess who it is? It's Rochelle. Sabatino's stunned. Police are stunned. They said that they found Rachel fully dressed, boots still on, face down in this barrel filled with rainwater. The actual question is, if all these yards were searched 3 or 4 times, how was she missed? She went missing in November, a very cold month in New York. When a body goes into very cold water, it doesn't decompose real quick. It stays fairly fresh. Well, the medical examiner made one of the strangest statements I've ever heard. He said that the death was accidental. Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me what else. He said that he couldn't determine the cause of death because the body was too badly decomposed. Well, how could that be? The body had been in the barrel since their claim was November 11th, but they said that there was some ice on the water at some times when they searched, and the water in the barrel was a little murky, but the water was near frozen. The police later stated that the yard had been searched multiple times, and that people remembered looking in the barrel and the water was a little murky, but they never saw anything. Okay. Do I buy that? Hell no. Police stated that their theory was that Rachel had stepped up on something near the barrel, fell in head first, and they never used the word drowned. They never used it. And she accidentally lost her life. That's what they said. Well, how's she going to lose her life in that barrel unless she drowns? And how can you determine she drowned if you don't do an autopsy? I'm very confused by all this. And then the biggest thing to me, and again, I've told you a million times, I'm not the brightest bulb in the room, not the sharpest knife in the drawer. But 2 of the best canines in the state of New York tracked her scent into a woods and out on a Webster Street. Can we just forget about that? That was the police's best theory for a long time. So you got canines, you got water, and you got no cause of death. But here, friends, doing the research on this case, I like to present to you everything. And I don't want you to think that I'm the only one thinking that this is weird. So her aunt gave an interview to the news a couple days after all this happened, after the body was found. Remember, Rachel's name was her nickname was Ray Ray. She said Ray didn't fall into the barrel. She was murdered. Her hysterically grief-stricken aunt, Mrs. Susie Martin, of the Madeline Avenue address, assisted as she joined a huge throng of mourners and morbidly curious at the scene late yesterday morning. Tragedy held accident. Her aunt stated, "How could 100 policemen, scores of Boy Scouts, neighborhood volunteers, and 2 trained bloodhounds have failed to find her niece's body if it had been in the barrel when the widespread search began almost 7 weeks ago?" the aunt demanded. Think about that. Here are people that really know nothing about search and rescue and things, but this woman was willing to put these facts together and say, this is really weird. I'm not buying this. It goes on. For days thereafter, searchers scoured the neighborhood for a mile around, poked into odd corners, and it was believed inspected every spot in which a body may be hidden. Mrs. Motto contended that little mute girl was slain and her body later dumped into the barrel. Let me explain this to you. In every case I wrote about, nobody saw the people go into the water. Ever. One case I wrote about, where a young college-age man remembered partying in a bar. The next thing he remembered, he's in a 28-degree river in the middle of February in Wisconsin, floating down absolutely frozen to death, thinking, how did I get here? What am I doing here? Nobody could explain how he got there, what he was doing there. He luckily got right out of the water onto the bank and lived. But every one of those stories never had a witness. Rachel never had a witness. Now, I want you to think about how crazy this is. Let's pretend you murdered Rachel. Why would you go back and stick the body hundreds of feet from her house so people would find it? Think of the immense risk of being seen doing that. Whatever's doing this, I don't think cares about the risk. It's not somebody carrying a body over their shoulder and dumping it in. There's something else going on. Because in all of these areas, there's a lot of people. Sometimes people are in the middle of a bar and disappeared. True story. Bunch of stories in here like that. How did they get out of the bar and nobody saw it? One of the cases, person disappeared in a bar that had a closed circuit TV camera on the second floor and nobody saw the person come out. They searched the bar the next day, nothing there. How did they get out? Exactly my point. Something else is going on here, folks. Somehow or another, Rachel, who was disabled, another profile point, she was mute. That is one thing that I keyed on this story right from the beginning. She wasn't a normal little girl. And she looked like a male because of her haircut from behind. Something else I've explained countless times before. Detective Gannon from New York Police, brilliant detective, figured this out way before I did. Yeah. And then the last thing was, I couldn't believe they didn't do an autopsy. They said that they couldn't. I don't believe that. I don't believe it. I get frustrated with this, as you can tell, but there's much more to this than meets the eye, folks. Thank you for listening. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Again, my gift to you this Christmas, this poster. I have another poster too. I'll sign it right to you. If you buy it between now and Christmas, glad to sign it. And we're getting the movies back up right now. I found another distributor. Hopefully it'll go well. And in the meantime, I appreciate you supporting us through our store. And hope you're having a great fall. Before I leave you, let me show you what my beautiful dog thought about my presentation. I put her to sleep. Oh my gosh. Paulides out.